At the beginning of our service, we mentioned that today is World Mental Health Day, and our well-being, our mind, the well-being of our mind, of our soul, of our mental health is so critical during these days of lockdown. We're missing being together, and that is a challenge to us, and it affects us in greater or lesser ways. Now, it's very important that we realise that when we're speaking about mental health, there's no stigma to mental health. There's nothing different between mental health and physical health. A broken mind or a hurt mind is just as crucial as a hurt or a broken bone. There should be no stigma. And that's why we wanted to spend today's theme around that whole topic of well-being, mental well-being. And so we've invited Moira Marshall to speak to us this morning. You may say, well, who's Moira? Well, I'm sure when you see her, who's Moira? You will recognise her, Margaret.
Where's Moira?
Where's Moira? She's going to be on screen in just a minute. Just calm down now. Just calm down. Where was I? Yes, I'm sure as soon as you see her on the screen, you'll recognise her. Moira serves the church in lots of different ways. She's part of our welcoming team. She takes part in serving coffee and tea when we're meeting together in the well. And she also runs our Zoom coffee mornings every Sunday morning. And recently she's just joined our finance team. But she has a valuable job, a valuable role in the workplace. And because of that, we thought we'd invite her to speak this morning. Margaret, could you enlighten us a little bit more, please?
Yeah, I'll try my best. So what we may not know about Moira is that in a professional capacity, she is a counselling psychologist. And she works in the field of employee well-being. So in a work role, she helps businesses to be more aware of how they can support their employees around all kinds of mental health issues and provide support service like counselling. So that's really important, isn't it, in a workplace, especially at these times, that businesses are up to speed with how to look after us all. If we have any mental health issues. So because of this expertise that Moira has, we thought it would be really appropriate today that Moira speaks to us and gives us some more insight into all that. I love a verse that says, in the Bible says, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. So we have to keep our minds healthy, we have to keep our souls strong. And so this advice today and what Moira has to say, I hope will be helpful to all of us in these times and for future reference. So there we are.
So there you are. And let's really be honest, shall we? Every one of us have issues with our own mental health on occasions.
Absolutely.
At times. Sometimes we may call it depression or we just feel totally fed up. But we need to know how to minister to ourselves. So sit back, relax, and let's listen to Moira.
Good morning, Well family and friends. It's so good to be with you this Sunday. Now, last week this time, people from all around the country, all around the world were competing in the London Marathon, all 26.2 miles of it. Any marathon runner will tell you that a race is as much about the mental as it is about the physical. And part of training for a marathon is about preparing for the hardest mile. That moment in time when you hit the physical wall, when the end of the race seems so far away. And it's a mentally grueling time. It's a time when your mental preparation in the race has to kick in to enable you to keep going, to push through the pain and continue to the end of the race. Now, life is a lot like this, especially when you start to hit tough times or when you throw a global pandemic into the mix. We have no idea when the end point of all of this is, and every month, every week, we are being given different guidelines. We are being given different restrictions. It feels confusing. It feels overwhelming. It feels like it's just too much. It's chaotic. So it seems really apt for us to acknowledge that yesterday was World Mental Health Awareness Day. Now, World Mental Health Awareness Day is celebrated or acknowledged on the 10th of October every single year, and every year it focuses on a different mental health theme. This year's theme, because of the pandemic, was actually changed, and the theme that they went with was mental health for all. And it really wanted to highlight that mental health isn't just something that a few people experience. It's something that we all have, that we can all experience. And that means that when people are struggling, everybody needs to be able to have access to the right level of support. You see, our mental health is something that we can take steps to improve, in the same way that we can take steps to improve and manage our physical health. Things like eating your 5 a day, getting a good night's sleep, going out and getting some exercise, going for a daily walk. These are all things that can help improve our physical and mental well-being. There are other things that can help us from a mental perspective as well. And I always think one of the key things is remembering to show yourself some grace when you are struggling. Show the people around you some grace. You don't know what they're going through, and can make the world of difference in helping to just push through and get to the end. Over the last 7 months, I've heard so many people talk about how they've hit a wall, how they have been fatigued, how they have felt such a sense of weariness. They've been overwhelmed, and in some cases have been struggling spiritually. And I know for myself, these are all things that I can certainly relate to, and I'm sure that a lot of you can relate to that as well. You see, we've had to adapt to so many things over the last period of time since the start of the pandemic. We've had to deal with social isolation. We've had to interact and meet up with our friends and family in different ways. And while the technology of things like Zoom has been fantastic, it hasn't really managed to bridge the need that we have. We've lost that sense of contact, that emotional connection, the physical connection of even a hug that we so desperately need. And we desperately need those things, because those are the things that help us at a soul level, at an emotional level, to thrive. Now, I'm using terms like mental health, mental well-being, emotional well-being, and I know that there are some of you that are probably going, "Oh, mental health, this isn't relevant to me. It doesn't apply. I'm not interested in this, this wishy-washy stuff." So I want to take a look at just some definitions and some statistics, just to help highlight how much it is relevant to each and every one of us. So the World Mental Health Organization defines mental health as a state of well-being in which every individual realizes his or her own potential, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to her or his community. Bear in mind, it does talk about normal stresses of life, and a pandemic is certainly not a normal stress of life, but hopefully we can see that our reactions to it are as normal as can be. Now, according to NHS England, 1 in 4 adults and 1 in 10 children experiences mental illness. If we look at the rule of 6 that we're currently living with, the 6 people that we can be in a group together with at any given time, and let's say those 6 people in our group are all adults, that means that 1.5 of them is potentially now will be experiencing mental health challenges. And if you look at your child's classroom of 30 children, then 3 of those children is potentially struggling with mental health. That very much means that it is something that we all need to be paying attention to. It's something that is part of our inner circles and our everyday lives, and it's something that our children are coming face to face with as well. Now, realistically, like with physical health conditions, there are different levels of mental health problems, and they do need to be treated differently. For some people, they may suffer from more serious mental health conditions, those lifelong conditions that with the help of medication, with the help of therapy and the right support, they're able to manage over time in the same way that a diabetic or an asthmatic can manage their physical health condition. And then there are the mental health challenges that any of us can experience. The thing that knocks us down for a time, but that with some space, with some time, with the right help, with grace, with support, we are able to recover from that. We are able to get through and come out on the other side. It really doesn't matter whether you have a more chronic mental health condition or you're just struggling with a mental challenge. Mental health is not a weakness. There's no shame in the struggle of mental health. You see, God knew that this world would be tough, it would be challenging, and He equipped us with an inbuilt natural level of resilience. That's the ability to bounce back after a challenge. It's like when you pull on an elastic band and you let it go, it reshapes itself, it reforms after being stretched. Our life experiences, our natural level of resilience all mean that the way that we react to, the way that we cope with the same life event is going to be different. And there is no one way that is better or worse than the other. It's just different. Some people may seem to cope really well with something. There might be people you've been looking at through this pandemic and going, wow, they are thriving through this. I can guarantee you that there are people looking at you and going, how are they thriving and I'm struggling? You may be feeling like you're falling apart, but you don't always appear that way. Now, fortunately, we are all able to build on, to improve on our natural resilience. We can learn new coping strategies. We can add to our emotional toolbox, and we can get help. I'd like for us to take a look at two well-known kings from the Bible. Now, each of them suffered from mental and emotional torment in their lives, but they responded to it very differently. Before I go any further, I just want to remind you, I'm a psychologist, I'm not a theologian, so I can only speak to their emotional responses. I cannot speak to the causes of their respective torment. Now, the first king is King Saul, the first Israelite king anointed by God. And if we turn to 1 Samuel 16, verses 14 to 17, we will read, and I'm going to be reading from the Christian Standard Bible. That's 1 Samuel 16, verse 14 to 17. We read, "Now the Spirit of the Lord had left Saul, and an evil spirit sent from the Lord began to torment him. So Saul's servant said to him, 'You see that an evil spirit from God is tormenting you. Let us, your Lord, command your servants here in your presence to look for someone who knows how to play the lyre. Whenever the evil spirit from God comes on you, that person can play the lyre and you will feel better.' Then Saul commanded his servants, 'Find me someone who plays well and bring him to me.'" You see, Saul was struggling mentally, and his servants were close enough in proximity to him to be able to see, to be able to witness the changes in his mood, the changes in his behavior that possibly other people in his immediate circle didn't see, or perhaps they didn't want to see, or perhaps they ignored because he was king. But Saul's servants recognized that he needed help. And they didn't say to him, oh, you need to just shake it off. They didn't just ignore it. Instead, they let him know that they could see that he was suffering, and they offered to help him. They suggested what we could call a treatment option that they believed would make him feel better. They suggested what we now know of as music therapy. You see, at a time when Saul needed somebody to step into the gap for him, to advocate on his behalf, to speak up and to say, we can see that you are not yourself, that you are struggling mentally, his servants did exactly that. There may be times when we all need someone to reach out, to acknowledge that they can see that we are struggling. Maybe they've noticed a major change in us. Maybe it's a complete withdrawal or a change in how we react to things. Or maybe they've noticed more subtle changes in how we do things, in how we're interacting in our moods. It's possible that we don't even realize ourselves that something is wrong. Maybe we're so used to just pushing through that we don't realize that fatigue, that listlessness that we're experiencing is an indication of a possible mental health challenge. And in these moments, same as with Saul, we possibly need somebody else to provide us with a reality check, to remind us to stop, to take care of ourselves, and to offer to help us to get professional support. In Saul's case, David's musical gift was the thing that helped him. So in 1 Samuel 16:23, we are told that David would play his lyre and Saul would find relief. He would feel better, he would be refreshed, he would be well. Depending on the translation you're reading, all of those descriptions are used. So during times of emotional stress, it might feel like you need to stop, you need to press that pause button on life, and that rest might bring you a little bit of relief for a bit, but you might need to agree to more help than that. You might need to take some action so that you can find true relief. Saul asked his servants to help him find somebody who could help him. He had to acknowledge that there was a problem and that he needed help, and he had to ask for it. He had to accept it voluntarily. I see a lot of posts on Facebook where an individual will highlight that they know some of their friends may be struggling with mental health issues, and they extend the invitation to say, my door is always open, the kettle's always on. And I find it very reassuring to see this kind of outreach. But the thing is that sometimes mental health concerns can be so debilitating that the act of picking up the phone and phoning a friend, or even getting out of bed and getting dressed, can just feel like too much. There are times when we need somebody to reach out to us first. And when they do that, we need to be ready to say, yes, I do need help, and I accept the help that you're offering, in the same way that King Saul did. By today's standards, Saul would be regarded as having a more chronic mental health condition. So let's take a look at the second king, King David. That's right, this is the same David that played the lyre and brought relief to King Saul. Now, I was listening to one of Crystal Evans-Hurst's podcasts the other day, and she said something that really struck me. She said that David's life as lived out, his practical reality, is detailed for us in the books of Samuel and the book of Kings. But his life as he experienced it, his emotions, are in Psalms. David's Psalms show us the full scope, the full depth of his emotions. He speaks of needing relief from distress in Psalm 4:1, of lament and crying for help in Psalm 5:1 and 2, of his soul in deep anguish in Psalm 6:3, of wrestling with his thoughts in Psalms 13:2, and of being consumed in anguish in Psalm 31:10, to name but a few. Now, David was a poet, and his language is a lot more colourful than what we would use. But the emotions that he expressed are ones that we can relate to. They're ones that we feel, that we experience. Our lives are filled with challenges and tough times, and it brings stress and grief and worries, whether we like it or not. David's Psalms show a raw, vulnerable honesty that let us know that he was not above struggling mentally and emotionally. What his Psalms also give us is a peek into how he was able to cope with those struggles. You see, David had built up a level of resilience over the course of his lifetime of responding to his environment, from protecting his father's sheep from bears and lions, from dealing with isolation or the solitude of shepherding, of being hunted under threat of death, of battles, of warfare, of leading a nation as a king, and many other things. David learned coping skills that made him resilient and made him able to bounce back from the mental distress. David developed a very personal relationship with God that was so strong that he kept coming back to God, even when he thought that God wasn't responding. In Psalm 56:3, David says, "When I am afraid, I put my trust in you." And in Psalm 59, 9-10, he says, "You are my strength. I watch for you. You, God, are my fortress, my God on whom I rely." You see, during times of trouble, David was able to dip into his emotional toolbox, and he used prayer, music, writing, friends, and gratitude to help him through. He was able to be renewed, refreshed, energized from each of these things. And the foundation was his faithfulness to keep pressing into God. He took both the bad and the good to God at all times. And let's face it, some of the bad was of David's own doing, the adultery, the murder, but he took it to God and he found grace in God. You see, what these two kings show us is that no one is above experiencing mental health challenges. They also remind us that everyone is created uniquely and that we all need help sometimes. And some of us might be better at asking for that help than others of us. So it's important for us to pay attention to our feelings, pay attention to the people around us. And when we notice changes in somebody else, we need to reach out to them, not as a therapist or as a confidant or as a deliverance expert, but as a friend, as someone who cares, who has empathy, and who's able to let that person know that they are seen, that they are loved, that they are valued. We all need grace in our worst moments, not words that make us feel worse about ourselves or leave us feeling unloved. As we faced with the reality of the second wave of this pandemic hitting, we need to accept that the race is far from over. This is the moment when we need to realize that we may not yet have reached the hardest mile, and we need to mentally prepare for what is coming. So if you find yourself feeling that you're hitting a wall, that you are fatigued, that you are overwhelmed by the demands on you, I need you to stop. Take a breath. Ask for help. Speak to someone that you trust. Go for a walk. Do something that you love, something that reminds you of who you are, that energizes you, because this is how you will replenish or fill up your own emotional tank. We are each responsible for our own mental health, and we need to look after our mental well-being. No one else can do it for us. Like David, we can build up on our natural resilience. We can consciously change how we react to the events in our lives. We cannot control the pandemic. We cannot control the restrictions that are being put on us. But we can control how we react to those things. so that we're able to adapt, we're able to bounce back even stronger. Use the tools in your emotional toolbox to help you cope better. And these are the things like prayer, like worship. And unlike David, you don't have to write the music. You can stream it, you can pop in a CD, you can turn on the radio. Journal. Be grateful for the blessings in your life. Listen to the In the Cool of the Day recordings. Practice the art of doing nothing. Be still. And above all else, press into God. He is your strength. He is your fortress, just the same as he was for David. We're going to put on a worship song now. It's by Amy Grant called Better Than Hallelujah. And I want you to really listen to the words. Let it minister to you.